Okay, so we are now. I'm going to take a little. So we're finished with a little story from Northwood Court, and there's going to be quite a bit more Northwood Court chronologically. I've got some other shit to say about those years of my life. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to give a little bit of background on Tim. He was my stepfather. For many years, I considered him my father because he was the first father figure that I knew. And from 1980 to 2021, 2021, he was with my mom. He was married to my mother. I'm going to try not to be too emotional about it right now, but it didn't end well. He left my handicapped mother alone for another woman after 40 years or whatever it was of marriage. And left me to pick up the pieces. And I'm still pretty emotional about that. I took care of my mom a lot that year. And was also left by my wife at the time that year. So there's a lot going on. And it was the year before I was initially hospitalized. So a lot of that's still pretty raw. So I'm gonna try to be as objective as I can and tell as much as I can. But we'll leave what happens after for later. And I'll just give some background about him and how we met and a lot of that jazz, so that when it comes to some things later on, it'll make more sense to be looking at him through my experience with him. So, as I mentioned, I think in the last video, my mother didn't really date during my life, not that I saw, until one night when she brought home Tim, I think if I'm remembering correctly, they had had a few dates before she brought him to meet my brother and I, and the first night I met him, all I really remember is that he had long hair and a big beard, and was a goofy dude. And I liked him a lot. I probably grew attached to him very quickly. He was just a goof, and I love that. I was a bit of a goof myself, so it was nice. My brother was not a goof at all, so to have somebody around that was like that, it was enjoyable. Even when it wasn't, for those first couple of years, it was more enjoyable than not. So my mom started bringing him around more and more, and we were living on Bridge Street in Bath, and it was just a mess. And so my mom told us that we were going to be moving, and we moved to Northwood Court. Tim, pretty much as soon as we got to Northwood Court, he pretty much disappeared a lot. And when he wasn't, he was around, and he was super goofy, and he was super fun. And I wouldn't know until much later that he was just always high, or he was either always high, or he was off somewhere getting weed to get high. One of the earlier memories that I have that sticks out, that explains a lot of his other actions and personality, was when we were moving in, I think, or it was either when we were moving in or shortly after, we had gone out shopping, and we went to, I believe we went to the main mall, and as we were coming home, I think, Tim decided to bring us to an Army Navy surplus store, because he thought that we could buy clothes or something in there. And we went in, and we were all walking around doing shit for however long, and at one point, Tim got really quiet and mad, he was red-faced mad, and my mom kind of rushed us all out and into the car. And we got in the car and Tim was driving and he was just slamming on the wheel, slamming on the dashboard, just pretty much hysterical. And I was scared shitless. I'd never seen anything like this before. And I remember crying and being freaked out, and my mom trying to tell me that it was okay, and Tim was just freaking out, and he kept mentioning something about a shovel, and at the time I had no idea what was going on, and I wouldn't know until I had talked to my mom about it years later, that he had seen a collapsible like backpack shovel in the store, and he had had a Vietnam flashback, because he had done 2 tours in Vietnam and he had been shot there and sent home. But this was all before us, of course. But he had been shot and sent home, and back then, but PTSD was not really a thing that was talked about a lot, at least not in normal circles. And but it was getting to the point where it was getting to the point where people were talking about it, like, I think like Rambo came out around then, which is, the way that America made pretends, like these guys are loners, and like something tweaks them out and they go like on a murder spree, but it's okay because he's an American hero, whatever the fuck. Just bullshit. But so I guess that he had just suffered a PTSD episode, because he had seen this shovel, and he had apparently, he had buried a friend of his with one of them, and it just came out in him like just instantly. He just snapped. He literally just snapped. And I think, and he was obviously, the weed was self-medicating, and it continued to be that way for all of the time, most of the time that he was married to my mom. So that informed a lot of who he was. He was either in a PTSD episode, or he was high. There weren't really very many other ways, ways that he would present himself. So a lot that happened after that. A lot that happened after that. He was always one of those two people. Um, and in those early days, it it might not have been quite as obvious because there were two guys that were around that were also veterans. One guy who was actually the father of Tina was I think he might have been Vietnam, but he might have been Korean War too. I don't recall. He somehow seems like he was older than that, but Tina wasn't that old either, but maybe. Tina was maybe like 10, 15 years older than Guy. Maybe 10 years, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But there was another guy that I don't remember his name, but he had a son named Gerald that I was really close with. Unfortunately, they were in the Navy, and they were only around for maybe a year and a half. But that dude and I were real close. I think I have like one picture of him from a birthday party of mine. I think maybe my 8th birthday party. But that guy, his dad was a Vietnam vet also, so he and Tim on the like weekends would like sit outside and smoke and talk shit like all day long. And that was another coping mechanism, I guess. So that's a bit of a Tim background. So I think that's a good foundation. So that one other things happen a bit later on. Pretty much the bad things that happened between Tim and I can be directly attributed to his PTSD, and the good things that happened between Tim and I can be directly attributed to his self-medication. And I don't really think that there was a whole lot more than that. So there's Tim's background, and I think that I'm just gonna have this be a separate video, and then I'll talk more about Northern Court tomorrow. There's several short little stories that I have that take place in Northern Court that are fun to tell and aren't quite so down. And I kind of want to talk about all of elementary school, or at least not all of elementary school, but at least up until 5th grade, kind of all at once, with maybe a couple of exemptions. I'm not sure, but anyway, no need to keep going on about that. Jasmine, Jack, Silas, I love you guys. And I hope that this is useful for you. If anybody else is watching this, yo. All right. Till next time.